This is Seluvis, Ranni's least likable servant by far. This is Pidia, a carrion servant. You might know him as, "Ah crap, I fell off that cliff. Lucky this building was here. Who the heck is yelling? Why are those creepy-ass puppets standing around that body?" It's nowhere near a guarantee you will interact with either of these two in a blind playthrough, but if you have dealt with them, you know they spend way too much time with puppets. And they've also got a few other things in common. These similarities have led some people to believe Seluvis is a puppet being controlled by Pidia. I bought into this theory at first, but then I dug into it a little bit deeper. You will only be able to meet Seluvis as part of Ranni's quest line. His hologram is immediately rude to you, but asks you to come over and hang out. If you do, he trashes you for being dumb enough to think he was serious, but then asks you for a little help with a side project. At this point, I remember thinking, okay, FromSoft, I see what you're doing here. This guy is going to soften up and grow on me, or maybe we're going to find out the reason he was so mean was because he was in love with our dead mom since they were kids or something, and give him a brutally sad death. I effing wish. This guy was a monster. The errand he has you run is to give a Cosby cocktail to Nefeli Lou. He doesn't tell you what it does, but if you show it to Gideon, he'll give you some clues. He calls Seluvis a dolly botherer, which somehow feels polite and visceral at the same time, and he tells you that the potion will turn her into a puppet. This interaction combined with the description of the Dolores ashes make quite clear that these two have history, which spurs my first doubts. Nefeli and Dolores seem like pretty personal targets for Seluvis, and even if Nefeli is revenge for the village Gideon wipes out, agitating someone whose nickname is the All-Knowing while hiding such a big secret seems like the definition of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You can give it to Gideon, who will dispose of it, Nefeli, who will become Seluvis' new really real doll, or Dung Eater, who gets what he effing deserves for what he does to Blackguard, America's Tits, Bogart. If you gave it to Nefeli, you can find her in Seluvis' secret chambers mentioned in a merchant note. Down some stairs blocked by an illusory floor is his collection, which includes Sleep Spammer Dolores, probably not our finger maiden Theralina, and Let Me Solo Her. There's a note that says Seluvis' puppet, do not touch on the back wall, just in case you wanted to know who's responsible for this horror show. I honestly have no idea who this note is supposed to be for. Maybe Selen, since she's a frequent guest, but I can't imagine she would have gone there without him. There's another illusory wall that leads to a back room with Nefeli, Selen's backup body, and a bed. I can't say I remember ever having the placement of a piece of furniture make me so uncomfortable in a game before. I hate to linger here, but unfortunately this is where more doubts come in for me. Someone is sleeping and or banging here, and I'm pretty sure Pidia doesn't have the working parts for one of those, and, ignoring the logistical challenges of getting here with no legs, sleeping here would be such an unnecessary risk. Puppets don't sleep, so that leaves us with him being the precursor to hentai gamers, or Seluvis using the bed before being put on strings. The latter greatly restricts the timeline for when Seluvis became a puppet to sometime fairly recent. As for the former, Seluvis seems to have access to the body swapping magic that Selen uses in her questline. Pidia's body is super scuffed. Wouldn't it make way more sense to make a Jake Sully swap? When you report your success to him, he'll start selling you spells. Mentioning his non-consensual sex dungeon allows you to extort a puppet spirit out of him. Probably could have been avoided if it weren't for that dumbass self-incriminating note, buddy. He offers to cut you in on his big score, Ranni the Witch. For this puppet potion, he needs Amber Starlight, and of course he wants you to fetch it. This is when I think you're supposed to find Pidia. Seluvis doesn't even give a crumb of a clue where to find it, but Pidia sells a weathered map to the Amber Starlight. To me, this hurts the Pidia controlling Seluvis narrative as well. It doesn't make any sense not to pass this info along through his puppet somehow. I've seen people claim Pidia's initial greeting as evidence. The idea is, he greets you like he recognizes you because you've talked to Seluvis. While he does seem to know you, I started a new game and went straight to him without talking to Scoob and the gang at all. And he still says the same thing. I'm pretty sure he recognizes us from going through the manor. These spirit soldiers look an awful lot like puppet spirits, and I think they're his doing. You bring home the Starlight, and Seluvis manages to create the special puppet pop, despite no doubt being fully erect the whole time. He asks you to give it to Ranni. I have to admit, the thought of having demigod spirit ashes sounds like some good old game-breaking OP fun. I think I'd rather have Radahn though, and we could probably trick him into it by shoving it into a dead body like how people put dogs' pills into peanut butter. But Seluvis is a goddamn degenerate, and I'm pretty sure he only wants Ranni because she's got more hands for jobs. So thankfully, the plan fails and he ends up dead whether you help him or not. Seluvis' end is where the puppet theory really begins. When Seluvis dies, his body is found in the deactivated puppet position. This means he's a puppet, right? Well, Ichi is found in the same death pose, so it doesn't necessarily make it true on its own. And while I do think he is now a puppet, I don't think this necessarily means he was always a puppet. I think it's just as, or maybe more likely, someone had a fantastic sense of humor and killed him by giving him a taste of his own rohypnol. Pidia and Seluvis' deaths do seem to be tied together, but the timing seems to hurt the case more than it helps. The two do not die at the same time. Seluvis dies, and then shortly after, we can hear Pidia being murdered by puppets. This would mean Seluvis' death leads to Pidia's death, not the other way around. Pidia will have spirit ashes for one of Seluvis' favorite puppets on his corpse. So why would Seluvis give him his most precious toys? Well, he doesn't. At least, not his favorite part. That's still at the foot of his bed. There are two parts to puppets: body and spirit. When we buy puppets from Seluvis, we get the spirit. Unfortunately, the bodies remain in the Chamber of Secrets even after purchasing. If you buy Theralina, her body will still turn up at the Radahn Festival. If you feed Dung Eater the Forget-Me Juice, you can beat him to death right after and his body won't turn up in the cellar, but his ashes still end up available. Seluvis as a puppet just doesn't seem to fit with how puppets work in the game. They don't seem to be directly controlled, but instead programmed. Finger Maiden Theralina will still help you out at the Radahn Festival, even if you get Seluvis and Pidia killed, or make Ranni and the gang mad at you, implying those commands were given to her ahead of time, because I sure didn't ask her to come. She's about as useless as tits on a turtle in that fight. Then there's the talking. From what we see, it seems like puppets can't talk. Clearly Seluvis has no problem talking. Maybe he's special or something, but this does raise more doubts. The theory kind of requires that Pidia is jacked into Seluvis like Avatar. I just don't think that's how puppeteering works. And even if it does, it would open more holes. Is one dormant while the other one is active? How would no one notice? I think these two had a working relationship like the Tarnished One and Seluvis. Pidia would help Seluvis with his puppet schemes in exchange for learning in puppets. Seluvis didn't trust Pidia though, and put insurance in place, an if statement in those cuckoo puppets. If I die, then kill him. I really wish FromSoft would have given Pidia a hitbox so we could kill him and get an answer. I think they did it on purpose to keep us from asking the real questions. Like, who's the monster that wrote that "my puppets are like my children" line? That shit hurts my soul.